Moving on from the survey where we saw that for the averages that most people are on board with events, but also that there are a lot of diverse needs, we need to ask, how do we meet those diverse needs? And I think to do that, we just want to rewind a little bit and go back to look at the model of youth ministry as it has been practiced in most Catholic parishes over the last 50 years. The first thing we want to look at is kind of the structure, how it's set up in the structure. You see we have a circle here representing the parish community and a circle here representing the youth group. And notice that the youth group is separate from the parish community. Now this model assumes that youth needs are similar and that youth like to join groups. That's thus the name youth group. However, those two assumptions I believe are true. These next two are not so true anymore. If you have teens, of course you know that youth are not available at the same time. So that assumption's out the door. And if you're a part of any kind of organization that requires a lot of volunteers, any kind of scouts or anything like that, you know that this second one, that one or few adults can meet the needs of groups, that you know that that's not true either. And a youth minister by themselves cannot run a youth ministry. So what should we move to meet a diverse needs? Again, this is only one youth group, and it meets the needs of only those that are available to meet at one time, and it tends to serve the needs of just some of the teens, or perhaps maybe the teens that are close to the youth. A new model that we might consider is, instead of having one youth group, is, as you'll notice, have several youth groupings. In other words, we recognize that that youth are at a different place in this journey, this last assumption here, and they have diverse needs, and that one group cannot meet all of those needs. So rather than just having one youth group meeting night, we would have smaller groups meet on different times. We would still have times where we would all try to come together, but not everybody we would expect to come because of schedules and whatnot. But we're realizing that teens are at different places in their faith. We want to meet them where they are and then call them to a deeper relationship with Christ and His church. We also realize that these little circles of youth groupings are not outside the parish community, but are inside the parish community. They're more integrated into the parish community, and that's the goal of this map here, is to show that we want to integrate youth into the community. Now, why do we need to do that? I thought youth would like to be with people their age, and that's true. They do need to have their own unique spot. Notice that still it is its own unique group, and it's not completely integrated into the parish community. They do need their own place, their own unique place. But we also recognize that we're dealing with a very detached youth culture where youth are very disconnected from their families and from adults in the wider community. And so we want to integrate them into the community to foster those closer connections with families and the wider community. Part of the study I was reading last week talked about how many teens are not even able to communicate on an adult level. And they don't even know what adult life is supposed to be like, because everything they know is just from the media, and perhaps their own family is not the ideal either. But they don't always know how to live the faith as adults, and that's why we want to have them have opportunities to build relationships with adults. Now, for those that come from faithful families, the big advantage in having them in youth ministry is that the adults that they build relationships with are going to reinforce what you're doing at home. It reinforces it because they see that, oh, this just isn't my parents that have this faith. There are other adults that are living it out there too. So they're not only seeing that their peers are living it out, but they're seeing it lived out in an adult way. Also, We need to build on just thinking of the youth as the church of tomorrow. Yes, it is true. They are our future bishops, our future priests, our future, even our future pope, future moms and dads and religious. That is true, and we need to train them up. But they are also the young church of today. Vatican II called us to a vocation of holiness from our baptism to shed light on the world in whatever circumstances we are in. It highlighted the fact that the laity can go into places that the clergy cannot, into the workplaces, into the schools, and that's especially why the youth have a vocation, not just a future vocation, but a vocation right here and now to shed the light of Christ on some of these very dark places that they are in every day. If they're in school, they can be a unique witness for Christ in a way that we adults can't. They can reach out to their peers in a way we can't. And this goes the same things for their extracurricular activities or sports and in their family life. They have a unique vocation, and it begins right away. And they also have gifts of the Holy Spirit from baptism, and as those gifts are strengthened in confirmation, even more so. This effect of having young people integrated into the parish community and living out their faith in a way that is not separate from the community, but other people can see they're living out their faith, and it inspires middle-aged and senior citizens even, as it did so many times for Pope John Paul II. So as we think about meeting these diverse needs, I think it's important to pause for a moment and say, what kind of characteristics are these programs going to have, whether they be a program to reach out to teens that already have a relationship with Christ, already love the Catholic Church, or whether it's those teens that have been baptized, but their parents are forcing them to come to Mass and just hasn't quite clicked yet, or whether it's those teens that are not Catholic at all, don't come from good families, and we need to reach out to. What characteristics should be universal throughout all our programming? The first is the Eucharist. Our programs must be Eucharistic-centered. The Eucharist is Christ himself. The Second Vatican Council said that the Eucharist is the source and summit of the Christian life. It's the source of all of our Christian life, and it is the summit of the Christian life. Secondly, it must be Marian. Mary is the model of all Christians. She was the first disciple of Christ, and she lived perfectly as a disciple of Christ. She's a model for all of us, including teens. And she also is our mother. And she also is Queen of Heaven, a very powerful Queen Mother, intercessor, the mediatrix for all of us. And these first two characteristics of our youth ministry are going to set us apart from Protestant youth ministries. And these first two things are very powerful because they give us a way to deepen our relationship with Christ in a way that Protestants just simply are lacking. Now, they've done a good job with what they have, but we haven't always utilized the fullness of the faith when reaching out to our teens. And a part of that being solidly Catholic is being faithful to the magisterium. And that means that our volunteers, those who are teaching, those who are interacting, must not only assent to the teachings of the Catholic Church, but they must know their life-giving power. Because if you're just blindly assenting, or if you are simply signing a piece of paper, but it hasn't really seeped into your heart, well then the teens are going to be able to see right through that. We want to have volunteers and people working with teens that love the Church and know that its teachings are life-giving and are without error. Finally, this characteristic called dynamic is twofold. First of all, we must be dynamic in the sense that we are flexible in terms of how we present our ministry to teens. Now, the truth itself that we present is unchanging. God is unchangeable. But our culture is changing. We must keep a depth to it, and we must be connected to it. We must be able to enculturate the gospel for every time. And I understand that the way we do that now, here in 2011, might be different in a few years. And so we need to remain flexible and make sure that we are meeting the teens, make sure that we're effective in meeting the teens where they are. The other part of dynamic, I mean that we must be a dynamic youth ministry and be something that the teens actually want to be a part of. So having those characteristics, what is the vision for our youth ministry? As I mentioned, that we must have diverse programs to reflect the spiritual and social needs of the teens. Now, because we want to have diverse programs, this means that we will have many programs. And I want to be clear that I don't expect every teen to be involved in every program. Depending on the frequency of when a program is ran and how it meets, I think it would be good for each teen to be involved in one smaller group type activity that meets regularly and one activity that meets with a larger group, whether weekly or monthly. Both have value, but rather than being involved in everything, they might want to pick one in each category and stick to it. So as we look at these, I just want to throw out a few of these: Bible studies and discipleship groups. Discipleship groups are Bible studies that are centered on getting the teens to have a conversion to Christ. They're led by an adult, usually, sometimes by an older teen, and they get them to a point where they have conversion of heart, and then where they are taught on how to be a follower of Christ. Christ's disciples spent 3 years with them to learn how to follow him, and we too must spend time studying the Word to know how to follow Christ. Gender separate formation. This is an interesting one because we got some really good comments on the survey towards this, and then we had one from a teen that said, "Stop separating the boys and the girls." Well, with this and with everything, I think it's important to keep in mind to have a balance. There are great advantages to gender separate formation in that men and women are not just different physically, they are different spiritually. They pray somewhat differently, and they have different needs. And when they meet as gender separate, those needs can be addressed in a much more frank and deeper way than they can in a mixed group. That being said, it is also good to have mixed groups and have the sexes interact and have a balance between gender separate and mixed formation. Teen nights would be an example of something that would be mixed. They are nights where you have a theme, a catechetical theme, and all the games are geared towards that theme. There is high energy music a lot of times. There is snacks. There is a talk. There is small groups. Things move very quickly, and before they know it, they've been catechized and don't even know it because they had so much fun. That's the goal of these teen nights. Retreats and conferences where we go away. It's amazing what can happen when you get out of your comfort zone, when you're with hundreds or perhaps even thousands of teens. They catch the Spirit in a way that sometimes it's a little bit harder to in the normal everyday parish type activities. Workshops, pro-life outreach to the poor, mission trips, work camps. I myself love learning. I love to be in a classroom. I understand not all people are like me or are intellectual or academic or anything like that. Some teens are going to grow closer to Christ through using their hands. That's the primary way that they will serve God. And so these work camps and mission trips provide a great way for them to grow in their faith, if that's one of the primary ways that they can connect with God. Sports and recreation and community building. I want to just briefly mention that, we have this great sports facility, this gym here, and I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of teens wandering the streets. And this will be something more towards the future, but we want to reach out to those teens that we might not be able to reach with our teen nights or some of our small groups. Maybe the only way we can get them in the door is through sports. Well, let's do it. And then maybe we can touch them in a way that we never could have before. And that everything, even our sports ministry that we hope to have in the future will be towards the goal of bringing teens closer to Christ and to His church. Now, I think it's important to keep in mind that programs themselves are not the end. they serve the end of evangelization. And so when a program becomes merely something that is social or something that is merely just sports, and it's not being geared towards the end of evangelization, bringing teens closer to Christ and His church, we need to reevaluate it. And so that dynamic characteristic, remaining flexible. And another vision, that a part of the vision is to have youth leadership, especially in the upperclassmen of high school. Give them a chance to minister to the younger. Give them a chance to provide an example. The younger kids often think the older kids are cooler, and we can capitalize on that. They give them a chance to model spiritual leadership, and also give them a chance to try some adult type of leadership when it comes to planning activities, to take responsibilities towards inviting people and promoting an event and organizing and set up and tear down and all that. Give them a chance to do this here even while they're a teenager. That doesn't mean that, if they say, hey, let's go, we vote to go bungee jumping, that I'm going to say okay. Again, they are in an advisory role, but I do want to give them a real chance at leadership. And already we've had about 15 teens step up to this role, and they have themselves decided to make prayer commitments where they offer up a holy hour monthly for their fellow teens and a rosary every week, and they're being assigned to different ministry areas. Now, if you want to find out more about that, please contact me. We already have the whole structure set up and are meeting regularly. We also want to have, as I said, a core team of adult leaders. We want to have adults that can model that faith for them. And the young adults often are especially feel called towards this because they're closer in age and young enough that the kids still think they're cool. But I want to make it clear that it's just not young adults that kids need to see living out the faith. We welcome people of all ages. But I know that traditionally, especially single young adults, are really drawn towards youth ministry, especially just coming out of it. Maybe they were in it five years ago and they want to serve. So we want to have a strong core team of adult leaders that mentor, that take the teens through these important years and reinforce what's going on in the family. We also want parents involved in programming. We want them involved in planning, coordinating events, and in some cases teaching and mentoring. And I'll talk about the two types of volunteers towards the end here. And I know that everyone's busy, but we want to make it clear that there's a place for everybody in volunteering this youth ministry, and we want to have as much parental involvement as possible because we want something that fosters the family and not always something that you just drop them off at. Yes, there will be times when they need to meet separately. But if you volunteer to be a small group leader, say you're a mom, we're not going to put you in the same group as your daughter, small group, but we do want you to have a role. Maybe you'll teach. Maybe you'll have another small group. And so as we close, the next slide will be about the timeline, and we will look at the immediate schedule for the fall, the spring, and even on into next year.